Hi, my name's Nigel Fellows-Freeman. I'm the founder and CEO of Canopy. Canopy is an insurance platform that enables insurers, MGAs, and distributors to build, launch, and scale embedded insurance solutions at speed and at very low cost. Recently, we were really happy to be part of this year's Insurtech Summit, hosted by Insurance Business Australia, and that was at the Amora Hotel Jameson in Sydney. And that was just a few days ago, and the summit was a great opportunity for us to meet Australia's leading insurers, talk about the emerging trends that were within the insurance industry and insurtech specifically, and really find out what was going on. My team and I specifically held a VIP lunch session, where we sat down with a bunch of folks who are kind of thought leaders in the space and really discussed how insurers can really start thinking about creating value and driving growth through strategic partnerships. And a really core part of that was to invite Lynn Thompson from QBE Ventures. She's the head of commercial and partnerships there. And she was able to join us and really took us through a bunch of her thinking about how the incumbent insurers and their perspective on how they think about partnerships, how they think about how working with insurtechs, and that really, I think, made for a really enriching and encouraging environment and experience for everyone was there, and hopefully we can kind of dive into a few of the thoughts and some of the kind of themes that ran through the session, and hopefully I think they'll be helpful to a broader set of folks.
Yep, absolutely. Hey, this is Aki. I work with Canopy's marketing team, and we'll be delving deeper into Nigel's experience at the summit. So, Nigel, what were your thoughts on the event as a whole?
I think the event as a whole, it was a tremendous success. Actually, when I think there's a bunch of different conferences that happen through the year, and each of them have their own kind of themes running through them. And I think if we kind of look at that event personally from a personal perspective, there was a bunch of really kind of thoughtful and kind of leading folks in the industry that were able to kind of provide their perspectives, bring kind of some different thinking that you don't always get the time to think about and to reflect on when you're kind of in the business day to day. And I think kind of when you go to those events, and at this event specifically, it really kind of stood us up and started thinking all the way from kind of really core compliance work and how kind of data should be thought about, all the way through to the final session of the day from Alex Taylor. He's kind of leading the tech team there at QBE. And he kind of really dived really deep into how crypto and NFT and blockchain is really kind of how can have some really specific use cases in the insurance space. And so super interesting, super insightful, and definitely worth our time.
That sounds really cool. So, you mentioned that there were a couple of perspectives present. Would you mind elaborating? Like, what perspectives did you find?
Yeah, I think it really came from the breadth of people that were there. And so there was some kind of startup insurtech folks. There was some general insurance people, so from kind of the property and casualty space. There were some health insurers. There were some life insurers. So the breadth of people across the industry, I think, all had really different thoughts and around the same topics. And so maybe I use an example of data was one of the first sessions of the day, and one of the kind of the key conversation pieces is around data and the larger corporates, the AIAs and the kind of boopers of the world are really talking about how data and having a data strategy and a corporate strategy around it, and really were really thoughtful around the risk that it presented. We're trying to use it in a really intelligent way and use it to help customers, but very much kind of deep frameworks to protect the customer's data is very important to them. And they're really struggling to use all the data they have available. And you compared that with kind of some of the startups who are kind of very nimble, very kind of really keen to try and kind of work in an iterative way and use the data at the core of their systems, and had it as a way they worked rather than trying to kind of add it in later. And I think that really gave a really nice kind of contrast of how kind of large enterprises and large corporates think and must think about data, and how kind of young companies are trying to think about using it innovatively for the customer.
Yeah, speaking about that contrast that you mentioned, I was just wondering, did you find that insurers were largely open to the possibility of collaboration in their respective spaces? Did you see that that was largely the opinion of
Yeah,
insurers?
yeah, I think it was actually. I think, and I think that opinion is gradually shifting and changing. I think if you look at kind of fintech from maybe kind of 5, 8, 10 years ago, I think insurtech and insurance as an industry is going through a same evolution, and that is going rather than just purely using the terrible word of disruption, disrupting those kind of incumbents, and more to enabling and working together. And the incumbents and large insurers really understanding now that they can't build everything themselves, and so how do they kind of acquire and get the tech and the insight that they need, and that's really to partner. And so, kind of, they're now on that journey of how do you kind of partner with startups? What are the things that you should look out for? What are the things that help those partnerships go really well? And so, I think that kind of that transition that those large enterprises and those large corporates have gone through have now kind of reached a point where they're really open to it. They're really looking into it and looking how to. And I think the door's definitely open for the right companies to be able to partner and build really kind of really great commercial successes that I guess are fundamentally and most importantly are great for the customer.
Yeah, that sounds like a really exciting time in insurance. I was just wondering, are there any particular areas of insurance where you find that this collaboration seems to be booming? Any examples that come to mind? Maybe.
Yeah, I think there's probably a couple. The I think in the the first drive within insurtech, I think, has been on the distribution side, and so insurance kind of at its core is really good at underwriting and back office, but maybe not as good at customer journeys and understanding how to make a beautiful experience for a customer. And so I think there's a lot of partnerships on that side of the coin in terms of how to reach and get to new customers. And then I think there's a bunch of partnerships going on in the data space. But I've just mentioned that obviously there's a huge amount of data that's collected and held onto by insurance firms, but they don't really know how to use it or what to do with it. And so there's a lot of collaboration happening in that kind of that back end in the data enrichment side to really help those incumbents understand the data that they've got and how they can best use it for the customer.
Yeah. Um, you mentioned that there was a wide breadth of insurers present at the event, and that would have given you, I bet, a lot of context in terms of the specific challenges that some of them would have described. So, if you just wanted to maybe elaborate on some.
Yeah, so I think there are a number of challenges, and actually at the lunch there was a number of challenges that were discussed specifically, and a lot of them centered around trying to make sure there's an alignment of understanding of the want and desire of the outcome of the partnership, and often the kind of the problems in partnerships were found when there was two kind of misaligned companies, and they on the surface they were aligned, but really boiled down to it. Like one company wanted growth and the other revenue, or the second company or the corporate potentially was worried about the startup going out of business in a year or two's time, and so was concerned about how you kind of create a partnership and a deep partnership that's meaningful to the large enterprise if they're kind of worried about the liquidity of the startup itself. And so I think there was a number of challenges that were highlighted, but I think the encouraging thing that I took away from the lunch specifically, and there's some really great insights from it, and that was that there's a really openness to try and an openness to learn and an openness to go actually. With this needs to happen. We need to partner here. We understand where we're great and we understand where we're not so good. And as long as we're kind of open and candid on that, there's a real chance and possibility for to create those partnerships and get over those challenges. And so I definitely came away with a very very positive outlook on how I think the growth of partnerships generally across the sector are going to grow and blossom over the next little while.
Okay. And just in terms of like some of the solutions that emerged out of those discussions, did you have any bit more insight into how big insurers are tackling these challenges in their collaborations?
Yeah, they a couple of the areas they were thinking about was how they could get to proof of concepts very quickly, and so merely kind of trying to keep these partnerships outside of the core business. So as soon as they kind of got sucked into the core business lines and they kind of got in prioritization battles with BAU, that became, I think, really hard to get those partnerships done. But it really came out that when they were kind of separate and when these ventures were spun up on the outside of the core, then they had a chance, and they had a chance to move quickly. They didn't kind of get dragged down into the bureaucracy of the large enterprise, and they had a chance to kind of, and if they kind of proved themselves and the POC got up, then it can kind of be exposed to the broader business after that. And so that was kind of one area of solution of how they were thinking about it. And I suppose the second part was there was actually, and Lynn spoke a lot about this, and And that was really the structure of the CVC, so that the corporate venture capital, and that was that they take a view of how can they partner as well as invest in the startup that they're working with, and that gave them, I guess, some confidence in the liquidity of the business. It also gave them an ability to kind of have conversations around what's being built and what's the direction of the company and how it aligns potentially with some of the things that they're trying to do. And so I guess kind of a point that kind of Lynn made, it was that, yeah, the having that part attached to a corporate was a really strong proposition to help kind of build the partnership proposition to really kind of help leapfrog them in getting to parts of the segment and parts of tech that they don't have the capability to do themselves.
Awesome. I think that kind of leads me into the next question, which is essentially what were some of the distilled key insights that you could take away from the session and you'd like our listeners to kind of take away from this session as well?
Key insights. Good question. I think there was probably three, and I think the primary one was hard, candid, honest conversations early, because it's much better for both the startup to get a fast or a short no, a quick no, I should say, as well as it is for the corporate. And so having kind of hard, candid, honest conversations early was really important and really get to the heart of getting the alignment, like I mentioned a little bit earlier on. I think the second learning was having multiple stakeholders kind of have being ambassadors on both sides of the coin, and so both within the startup and both within the large enterprise and the corporate, to have multiple people involved in the conversation at a high enough level to make decision. Because leaving stakeholders and changing stakeholders really kind of was often a death nail for a bunch of partnerships. And I think finally, having a really strong view of what success looks like. And so you both know exactly what you're driving towards. And so if you know that if that's a revenue number or a growth number or whatever that thing is that you're both working towards, having that kind of alignment early allows you both to work towards it, because as soon as they diverge, that's when the partnership breaks down.
Yeah. And I think that kind of leads me to my last question for you, which is, did you notice a trend or an insight that surprised you?
I was actually surprised a little bit at how again, kind of during the lunch, one of the last topics of the afternoon, we got onto, and this was like kind of very insightful thinking from Lynn, who used to work at Data Republic, obviously a large data company. It really came onto kind of open insurance, kind of who's thinking about it, who's kind of far along the curve in terms of getting there from a GDPR and those kind of understandings of how to use the data. And I suppose that surprised me a little bit that maybe the thinking more broadly wasn't quite as accelerated as it could have been, but everyone's starting to think about it. And although obviously kind of Treasury's only just come out, and the open insurance is probably in kind of year 23 or maybe even year 24, there's starting to be some thinking and some thoughts around it within the corporate enterprise. And so I think that's going to be an area that is going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. I think it was interesting to see who's thinking about it, how they're thinking about it, and what the use cases of the data going to be. And I guess the first part of that is the final part of that, I should say, is kind of making sure that you have the customer at the center, and really thinking, making sure what am I using this information for to give the customer a great experience. And I think that was maybe a surprise to me, that the breadth of how kind of people are thinking about kind of data usage within the open data world.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. And did you have any final remarks at all?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Thank you, everyone, to the insurance business folks that they're at Insurance Business Australia, who kind of put the summit together. A great day, great afternoon, wonderful content, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Awesome. Thanks.